Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning. And welcome to a conversation around the awareness on POPIA and understanding POPIA a little bit more. We are here today to have a conversation around POPIA. We are not experts, but we're just having I like to call it a bit of a fireside chat. So to have the fireside chat with me is Albert Gerber, who's been part of the journey at the Alviva group on the POPIA journey that they've had. So, morning, Albert.
Good morning, Senzo. It's been an interesting journey, I must admit.
You use a very interesting word, good choice of word. I would use it in our journey where we journeying on this at Tarsus. I would use a different word to interesting, but I'll keep that for later. So thanks for joining us this morning. I know you've been out of the country to do some work, so thank you for joining us this morning. We absolutely appreciate it. And then Albert has asked that I once again reiterate, and I will probably reiterate throughout the conversation, that we are not experts, but we are running this session today for the benefit of awareness. We understand that POPIA is a field of legal terms and other things that may be confusing for most of us. But what we do want to say is that we are here to chat and to have a conversation around what our experiences have been as we've done this and as we continue to do it, because the journey continues. It's not a beginning and an end. So you may also get involved and participate on the question and answer section on your Zoom. The chat functionality has been disabled. However, the Q&A is pretty much enabled. So please do ask any questions that you might have. We will try in the conversation to ask the main questions first. So the way we're going to structure this is that I've prepared some questions, and I'm pretending to be a very astute studio man a news anchor who's going to ask Albert some questions, and we're going to chat about it. But those questions are generic. You may find yourself that in your space you have some specific areas or specific things that you want to deal with. Please do ask those questions that are specific to you and specific to your context in the Q&A. So without wasting any more time, let's kick off. Albert, I think to launch straight into this topic of POPIA, POPIA Act, GDPR, let's call it information compliance. I think we can spend a lot of time chatting around what all these acronyms mean. Maybe just to set the scene. Why would anyone want my data, and why is data just suddenly becoming, or personal information rather, why is it suddenly becoming something that is top of the list of priorities?
Well, Senzo, this is a very important aspect, and it can actually hurt a company in a major way. And therefore, it's also important that we become legally compliant, because you could also be exposed to significant fines and even jail time if you don't comply. So the problem that we have with POPIA is that it's not a tick box type compliance. It's a principles-based compliance. And many a time people are keen to have these little tick boxes that they can complete. But this is what makes it so difficult, because there's no real guidance in terms of exactly what each company should be doing.
Yeah, I think something we were chatting about earlier when we were sipping coffee, you mentioned how you got onto this journey of finding out more about POPIA. So maybe two questions and you can wrap it up. Just maybe run us through what the main acronyms are. So I know there's POPIA Act, there's PAIA, sometimes when I say paella, GDPR, and all the different countries have it. But also, you're not sitting here as an expert. I think that's quite important for all of us to know that you've said to me oftentimes, I'm not an expert, I'm self-taught, I've read up, I've watched videos, and yet you're able to comment on what's happening. Maybe just run us through what the main acronyms are, and maybe I know you've got a couple of slides, launch into those, and we'll chat as we go.
Senzo, we've had a very interesting journey to become POPIA compliant in our company, and we've learned the hard way.
Yeah.
And as I said before, there's no one shoe fits all. And therefore, we did a lot of self-searching, scouting, and self-taught ourselves to find out what really should be done. So what we're going to do today, I'm going to get to those acronyms later on, because there's a lot of detail. The purpose of today is not to get into all the technical details. It's really to get a high-level overview of what we should be doing to become compliant and ensure that we are adequately protected. So what we're going to be doing today, we're going to give you a high-level overview of data privacy laws, what they are about and why we need them. Then we're going to go delve a little bit more into the South African context in terms of POPIA and what POPIA is. Some European-based legislation, GDPR, I'm going to explain the difference high level between POPIA and GDPR, European-based. Also discuss the non-compliances and the consequences if we do not comply with those requirements. And then there's certain principles for data processing that we should be compliant with. And POPIA specifically talks to 8 conditions of lawful data processing. So there are about 8 things in summary that we should be doing to ensure that we comply. And then lastly, we want to make it a practical session without getting into too much technical detail, and some quick wins and next steps for the guys who have not yet got their house in order. And I see that many of the big companies are still asking for folk to sign off on their data. So it means that some of the big companies are still not up to scratch as to what should be done. It's too late, but there is still some time to catch up and do the basics.
Cool, exciting. So I think we're getting on the train and it's just going to go, and it's gonna run very quickly. so Albert, I think let me. You briefly touched on why we should worry about information and why it's important, and you've just mentioned some big companies and small companies. This is relevant for whether you've got a 10-man band, a small little company, or a big company. So maybe just run through again why it's important, whether you are big or small. What are the hiccups that could pop up, and yeah. So in that context, does it matter whether I'm big or small, or is my information going to get stolen? Is this about information being stolen and fraud, or is it other things as well?
Data has become the biggest asset any company has now, and everybody wants our data. But I think what we should remember is that POPIA is not really just about companies, juristic persons. It is also the personal data of individuals, and individuals also need to ensure that their data is adequately protected, and they are protected against all these fraudsters. What we can now ask is, why do people want our data? And there's various reasons why people want our data. First of all, they want to commit fraud in our name using our data illegitimately. That's the first thing. Secondly, they sometimes steal your identity, and I think in a South African context, we understand exactly what that means and what the risks are. So identity theft and use your name for personal gain for a fraudster. Sometimes they demand ransom for the data that they've stolen. And some of the big businesses have had ransomware installed on their networks, and the fraudsters then demand huge payouts before they release the data. And a company without data is no longer a company or a properly functioning company. And then lastly, they also sell our data on the marketing lists, telephone numbers, and mainly for marketing purposes, so that they can specifically target each individual with very specific information.
Awesome. I think you've got a video that you want to show, covering what is data privacy. Is it privacy?
Privacy, POPIA. We'll get into the details later.
So I think we're gonna show that video now, and we'll chat post that video show.
Perfect.
Make no mistake, attackers are after the personal information your organization stores. Data breaches regularly expose millions of personal data records, which criminals use to commit fraud or identity theft. When a security breach results in a privacy failure, it's not just an internal problem. Laws like HIPAA and GDPR give data subjects the right to know what's happening with their personal information and impose stiff fines on organizations that fail to protect data privacy. So exactly what does it mean to protect data privacy? It means handling personal data with respect for confidentiality and anonymity. This applies to all data related to individuals, such as their names, birth dates, addresses, social security numbers, financial data, and medical records. Failing to ensure data privacy can cause lots of trouble. Even a single leak of personal data can have a serious impact on your organization's financial well-being and its reputation, since public, investor, and customer trust can be irreparably damaged. To protect data privacy, you need to understand what data you have, where it's located, and who can access it. Visit netrix.com to get started today.
So what is very important is that we know what data we have, where it's saved or filed, and how do we protect it. That's the key of this whole act.
Yeah, so it seems to me that it's about the cradle to grave of information, and I think it's important to also note that it's not just persons as individuals, but it's also persons in the legal term of companies' data, and so I think a lot of the material one reads talks about processing, and it describes processing from storing it, retrieving it, sharing it, and so on and so forth. And I think one of the questions that is important, that certainly I've come across over the last, since that changed from the 30th of June to the 1st of July, is maybe let's talk a little bit about jurisdiction. And I think when you start to talk about jurisdiction, you'll also talk about the various acronyms. If I'm sitting there and I'm starting to sweat and I'm going, oh dear, I haven't done anything about this, or I've tried, but I'm struggling and I'm not sure what I'm doing, but now I'm starting to get business outside of South Africa. Let's just, jurisdiction-wise, how high does POPIA rank? Because POPIA is a South African act and it's our regulation. Does it rank well against, if I just do POPIA, am I doing well against or in comparison to the rest of the world, or do I worry that I should be compliant with every single country that I am selling or dealing in?
This is a minefield. The data privacy laws around the world are so diverse, but almost all the same.
Okay.
So I've got a summary of where the key pieces of legislation are,
Okay.
And how we now need to pull this all together, because we're no longer an island working in South Africa. We're becoming a global community. And therefore, we need to take note of all the various laws that we have around the globe. And I'm going to quickly show you just a quick summary of some of the laws that are there. So in America, we've got a couple. The Chinese one is quite an interesting one. And then I didn't put them all on slide just for information purposes, but the two main ones that are relevant to us in a South African context are POPIA or POPIA, however you want to pronounce it. We'll get into the details shortly. And also GDPR. And you might ask yourself, why is GDPR in Europe specifically important for us? And I'll explain, or try and explain that in simple terms a bit later on. The business environment is so intertwined, and we obviously as a company, or many of the businesses that operate, have businesses all over Africa and also in European countries and also around the globe, making it very difficult now to just be POPIA compliant, GDPR compliant, and American requirements need to be adhered to. So what I'm going to give a quick sense of how we try and define a good middle way between all these various laws and how we try and achieve general compliance of all of them, because we might be exposed to all of them. So what I'm going to do, I'm quickly going to give you background as to where the word POPIA comes from. Okay. So we have an act that was enacted quite a few years ago, and it was called the POPI Act. Now, the POPI Act stands for the Protection of Personal Information Act. And that act was promulgated in 2013 already. So we have known that this is coming already from 2013. And they've given us a time period where we now could prepare ourselves and become compliant. But many businesses have not done anything until the 31st or the 1st of July, 2021. And now everybody's scrambling to try and get on board. So it's too late now, but there is still some quick wins to try and achieve compliance. So POPI is the Protection of Personal Information Act. It's the protection of the information. We also have an act called PIA, the Promotion of Access to Information Act, which gives people access to certain types of information, their own information or other company information. And that's an act that was written in 2000. So what they then did is they combined the two, not as an act, but together we refer to those two acts as POPIA or POPIA. And I try and remember it that it's like a papaya. It's easy to remember as a fruit, and that's how we can easily then name it. It's not an act, it's the name of those two acts together.
Awesome. You spoke a bit about GDPR being important to South Africa. What is GDPR? Why does it matter to me if I'm a business owner in South Africa?
Well, this is a very interesting question. GDPR is European-based legislation. Why does it impact me? The Act basically talks about the European Act. It gives you can, I stand to correct, I think you can get a 20 million euro fine if you don't comply with this Act. And if we process the data, the personal information of any European citizen or resident, we need to comply with that Act. And we are exposed to that Act or the fines associated with this Act if we do not comply. So very much, although it's European-based, I could be liable to a huge fine or prosecution if I just process data of one of their citizens.
Hold on, Albert. The English, I'm a Zulu, so the English got over me here. So if there's a person in South Africa, and this might be getting technical, if there's a person in South Africa who holds a British, I'm going to use Britain because they're now allowed to travel there, British passport, and they purchase something from me and I've got their information and I do something wrong, I myself or the company that I work for could be held liable for getting something wrong according to GDPR.
Correct, absolutely. And also what makes it even more onerous now is that we've got cloud-based information.
Yep.
So we sometimes host data for customers in the cloud. And we're processing EU citizen data, absolutely. GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation.
Okay, now it makes sense why you were saying POPIA, and GDPR are close. So if I'm sitting listening to what we're saying now, and I'm getting a little bit of heart palpitations,
which you should.
But at the same time, I've done quite a bit on POPIA. If I've taken the necessary steps and I'm in the journey, or at least I know that I'm going to be adhering to the POPIA requirements, how close will I get to being compliant on the GDPR scale? Is there a percentage, or is there a kind of, I know earlier you said it's a principles-based
Yes.
view. How would it get me close? If I just focus on POPIA for now?
I think what one should try and do is try and demonstrate general compliance, not compliance per se, but general data management. Then you will be on a good path already towards compliance. And I actually have a nice slide later on just to highlight what the differences are and how we can quickly achieve that. I think what we want to do is maybe high level, and that's quite a busy slide, just highlight the difference between POPIA and GDPR. GDPR mainly talks about data that is owned or relates to an individual. In the South African context, it's not just about individuals, it's also about juristic persons, which is it a body corporate or a business or an association or what it is. So that also involves companies. And then what is very important is that 20 million euro fine that we can get in the EU for doing something wrong here in South Africa or in a neighboring country for all that matters. So I think what we have to also maybe just need to show is that the acts are very similar, and that relates to your question, Senzo, is that POPIA and GDPR are more or less the same. Yes, they use different terminology, and on screen there, they just call things different names, although it's really the same thing. The only difference is with POPIA, they specifically talk to account numbers, and we need to ensure that account numbers are properly controlled. Why account numbers? Because people can defraud or use people's account numbers to commit fraud. And that's why we specifically in POPIA talk about account numbers that need to be adequately protected. In GDPR, they talk about genetic data, data portability. So when we have a new company that buys an existing one, can that data be ported over to the new company? And also privacy by design. How do you design your processes? But except for those few changes and a very high level here, there's not much of a difference between the two. They actually really have the same. And I think the next slide shows very nicely, and therefore we don't refer just to POPIA or GDPR compliance. We want to try and talk about data privacy compliance, because that really puts everything in a nutshell. So all these laws that you saw on the screen earlier basically are 80% more or less the same. Yes, they all differ a little bit depending on the territory, but in essence, all those various laws are more or less 80% the same. If you compare POPIA and GDPR, they're about 70% aligned. So let's talk rather about data privacy compliance instead of POPIA or GDPR or any of the specific laws.
Yeah, which is what I think the video we saw earlier was talking to data privacy.
That is correct.
And we summarize it to where you store it, how you store it, and what you store.
Correct.
The cradle to grave concept. I think one of the things that kind of got me to shake a little bit, you said something about 20 million euros.
It's not small change.
No, it's not at all. In the South African context, if I am in breach, I'm sure there's an amount that I'd have to pocket, or not pocket, get out of pocket and pay, or
yes.
potentially jail time. But so if I'm in breach and I'm found guilty, what are the ramifications? But at the same time, for who? So is it just for me as an employee? So say I do something wrong and I work in a company that's got 30,000 employees and I'm a junior. Mm-hmm. We've seen it in the marketing things where something goes wrong in a company and no senior person gets the wrap around the knuckles, but it's some junior person who gets fired.
Yes.
So in this case, if I've done something wrong, are there people in the business who are important who might get into trouble, or will it be the individual in the business who's done something wrong, no matter how junior or senior?
You can run, but you can't hide. And I think that's the most important part here. And I think we'll unpack that a bit later on as to who is ultimately liable.
Yeah.
There is the CEO takes ultimate responsibility, but we also have a data protection officer that needs to be appointed in each business, that needs to be registered with a data regulator. And that person could be held liable, but also the individual is not going to be squeaky clean on this, and he could face some serious consequences as well. And let's look at what can happen if there is non-compliance. Mm-hmm. So quite a few horrible things can happen to you. First of all, you know that you could lose a customer. We will all remember that one of our big banks had a data breach, and they reckon now it's not a matter of if you have a data breach, it's a matter of when you have a data breach. And if you don't manage the process properly, that bank has lost significant numbers of customers just because they felt vulnerable and they don't feel like banking with an institution that doesn't protect their data. So first and foremost, we cannot, in today's life especially, lose a customer or afford to lose a customer. Next up is there's a fine of up to 10 million rand for the CEO, for the data protection officer, or also for maybe the individual who was a perpetrator. The next thing that can happen is there's possibly jail time that could be a consequence of this. And not only the CEO is responsible here, the actual employee and also their data protection officer and the person who's the controller. We will get a bit into more detail as to what the role of the controller is, the person who owns the data, the HR manager, the data's controller, the guy that runs the PODs in the warehouse. He collects all the people's PODs with everybody's ID numbers on there. He's a data controller. He could be held liable if he does not control the data properly. And then we need to maybe pay damages if people start suing us for that, for the negligence. We could lose a vendor or a supplier because suppliers don't want to be associated with companies that are not compliant with legal obligations. And then last but not least, and I think it's very easy to break people's trust, but very difficult to build it again. And reputational damage, I think, is the biggest consequence of this whole act, is that we cannot afford to lose our reputation because you're not going to get it back easily.
Sure.
I hope I've scared you enough.
I am shaking in my boots. What are the things that you've mentioned? The data controller, data processing, the CEO, you mentioned information officers, deputy information officers. There seems to be a lot of terminology that is important to know. What are the key terms and terminology that's important for us to just be aware of? Because I'm asking this because I know there have been a couple of things where you said we're going to talk about it later, and I think understanding the terminology is going to come in handy when you actually delve deeper into those.
Okay, so some important terminology that we just need to be aware of is there's a difference between data privacy and data security. Data privacy involves the compliance with the data law and also how we collect, process, share, and destroy that data. And I think we've highlighted that before. So that's the whole process of the management, the compliance with the law. Data security is how we actually protect that information that we've now collected or need to destroy, how do we physically protect it? And it's two type of things that we need to do here. There's manual safeguards, lock and keys. Do we have a clean desk policy? How do people get access to their data and how we prevent them from getting access and how we secure it? But also electronic means. Obviously, we've got hard copy and also electronic data. It's physically how do we protect people from getting into our network and stealing our data that's so precious to us. Another term that we need to look at here is a data leak and a data breach, and those two are not the same. A data leak is basically information leaking from inside the organization. My employees that have got access to my data could leak that information to a marketing company or a competitor. So that's important that we have a policy, first of all, to control our employees, but second of all, that those employees are also properly trained and that the employment contracts are adequately updated so that they know what the requirements are and they can't then plead ignorance later, because it's easy to plead ignorance. And then last but not least is a data breach, and that is where our actual computer network is compromised and where the IT controls have not worked, passwords are weak, firewalls are non-existent or not in place, and then when that gets tested through penetration testing, how do we ensure that our network is secure for these fraudsters to come and grab our data from us?
Sure. So I know there's stuff you wanted to delve deeper into this, but now if I'm panicking, and I think rightly so, maybe just briefly, what are the low-hanging fruit that I could start with? I mean, you've mentioned that there's a need to register information officers. You've spoken about security breaches, and so then making sure that there are no leaks, especially in the world of digital, where we've got hard and soft copies. You mentioned the clean desk policy. Before we go into more detail, if right now I'm going, what are the low-hanging fruit that I could, if I haven't started anything, what are the low-hanging fruit where I should start? Where do I start now?
I've got a nice roadmap towards the end of this this chat, but quickly, you need to train your staff and you need to have policies and register your data protection officer. Those are the three critical things that I think one needs to address first. And I've got a nice roadmap that I will share later on, just to give folk who have not started yet, who have not done a lot, need to do to get themselves on the path to being compliant. I think what we need to do is we need to discuss first what personal information is. So there's a whole lot of stuff here. So in a POPIA environment, we talk about juristic persons. So that's companies, and it's not just individuals. So it's both individuals and companies. But when we talk about natural persons, that excludes deceased estates. So when somebody no longer is alive, that data POPIA does no longer apply to that. And what makes POPIA different, as I've mentioned before, are those account numbers that we need to protect those. In terms of juristic persons or companies, it is unique in South Africa that we look as well at the companies, not just as Europe, just on the personal side of it. And it also excludes deregistered companies and dormant companies. So as soon as a company is deregistered, that company no longer falls under POPIA requirements. So we can then freely start utilizing their data. So POPIA also only allows data transfer to another country which has similar data protection laws in place. And Europe has also now prevented us from receiving data unless we have data protection laws. So also our hand was maybe a little bit forced as South Africa, because Europe was not going to deal with us anymore in terms of data laws unless we had the same protection in place for their data. So that's a bit of the information that we need to be aware of. And then obviously if data is depersonalized, it's no longer personal information, so POPIA no longer applies. Let me explain to you. So we've got a whole employee database, and I've got people's ID numbers on there. I have their home addresses, their kids' names, their banking details as part of payroll. And if I strip that personal information out and I want to do data analytics, for instance, or I want to use it for demographic purposes, or if I want to do my BE scoring and the like, that data is now no longer allocated to a specific person. I can then do with that data whatever I want.
Excellent. But I mean, you've just covered what personal information is and what makes POPIA unique. In that it includes juristic people or companies, effectively. In the little reading I've done, it seems that children are in a special section of their own. From a perspective of personal information, the definition of what it is, how are they special and why?
It's not just children. There's a
Okay.
lot of other information that's also very specific. So I've got a summary of what personal information is.
Okay.
And you get personal information and special personal information.
Okay.
And if you abuse special personal information, and that relates to children, for instance, one of them, there's a significant increased fine and more severe penalty. So let me show you quickly what the differences are. So first of all, what is a juristic person? It's individuals, it's companies, it's trusts, it's partnerships, and this is different in POPIA, as I've mentioned before. So that is relates to companies and individuals. So let's have a look at it. Contact information: full names, city, surnames, street names, addresses, cell phone numbers, and email addresses. We've got reams and reams of lists of customer data, including cell phone numbers and email addresses. How do we manage that? The next category is technology identifiers, IP addresses, geographical information, and device identifiers. That's more the electronic side of it. But I keep an IP address if somebody comes into my website. That is personal information. Financial information, bank accounts, tax numbers, insurance information, salary details, and as I've mentioned before, account details. Account balances is also personal information. Often somebody phones just to confirm that they want to open an account. Well, how much does this employee earn? In the HR department, that's personal information. You're no longer allowed to share this unless the employee has agreed to that. Now we're getting to the meaty stuff. Special personal information, and that attracts more significant fines, and I'll show you that later, but includes race, ethnicity, religion, criminal data, genetic data, health, sex life and sexual orientation, biometric data. That comes back to your fingerprint when you scan your finger at the gates at your company when you access the gates. And account identifiers, and as you've mentioned Senzo, children under the age of 18. That is special personal information. And then another category there is ID numbers. We spoke about the PODs, proof of delivery documents, recording the recipient's ID number. I recruit an employee or a new prospective employee, her ID number is on her CV. That is special personal information. Photographs, driver's license details, dates of birth, work performance, your key performance areas. And also, what do we do with the data now when I access a gate at an office block? I record my cell phone number, my ID, and my car registration number in there, plus my name. That is special personal information. And the risk here, and I think the slide that we have summarizes that nicely. For the normal information, there's minor offenses, R1 million fine or 1 year in jail. And if you breach the serious, or the special personal information, that is seen as a serious offense. That's a R10 million possible fine or 10 years in jail. So this is not play.
Okay, so Albert, I think one of the things that you've mentioned is around getting to a gate.
What do you do with that information?
Yeah, exactly. But now, what's causing me concern? You know, I'm.
Is that why you're moving on the chair like
And
this?
if I could go white, I'll be going white and my knuckles will be going white. So what's causing me concern is, for example, where I work. When I get to the gate, the security company is a third party. They collect the information, they beep the car, the disc on the car. I get in, they bleep me with my card and
your COVID information.
And then they tell me and they ask me if I've coughed and whatever. I fill that in, I leave it with them. Who is accountable for third party information that is where they are collecting it on a company's behalf? And maybe that's who's responsible for that?
The business is the data owner. So who owns the data? The third party only collects the data on your behalf. Okay. So you need to ensure that you control that third party properly. And I think that is something that we need to discuss just after this next slide. So what needs to happen with that data? And I think let's summarize what the POPIA Act actually requires of us. Yep. So we are now not collecting the data, but we need to ensure that we keep that data controlled.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's 8 conditions. So POPIA talks about 8 conditions of lawful data processing. And let's have a look at what these are. I'm going to try and summarize high level. There's a lot of information here. If you want more detail, they might have to go and read the Act.
Okay.
But in order to just make this quite simple, first of all, you need to have accountability assigned. Who is accountable for maintaining that data? The company that records it, the individual who records it, the institution who records it, whether it's a trust, whether it's a body corporate, whether it's a business, an office block. He's the data owner. And therefore, you need to appoint a data officer. And that data officer is accountable together with the CEO if the data is not properly controlled. So first of all, you need to assign accountability. Second of all, next one. We need to have processing limitations. So we cannot continue processing the information willy-nilly as much as we want to after we've collected it. We need to get, first of all, consent from the data subject. I'm the data subject when I drive through the gate at that entrance to the car park. I need to get consent from that individual that I'm collecting his data. I need to make him aware of how the data is collected, and also how are they collecting that data. So you've noticed when you've been going on websites lately, they're all saying, oh, click on the cookie policy. So they're making you aware that they're collecting your data, and you're saying, it's okay, you can take my data now.
Sorry, Albert, on that, I was thinking about that websites. So then I'm also thinking about emails that get sent to me, and then I get something about opting in and opting out. Is that enough for companies to be doing on that point too? To say, well, by continuing, for example, you are opting in?
That's a very good question. So under this Act, you can no longer have people automatically be opted in and they need to opt out. They need to physically click that little block to say, I want to receive your spam email, I want to receive your newsletter. You can't just now go and send them information if they've not said that it's okay. And I think that's important for the marketing department, because the marketing department controls the email addresses, cell phone numbers of those companies, and they can't just continue sending you their price list unless you've agreed to that.
Okay.
So lots to think about here. That's the processing limitation.
While I continue sweating, please continue.
So there's also a purpose specification. There needs to be a specific purpose why I'm collecting the data. I can't just collect all sorts of data in case I'm going to use it in the future. I need to have a specific purpose why I'm collecting people's data, and also what is the reason for keeping it. How long do we keep it? If it's medical records, we need to have a policy on how long we keep it. And that brings me to the next point. There needs to be a retention period. I can't just keep information in infinity. And the Act says I need to destroy the data when it's no longer required. And you need to ensure that you have a data retention policy. But that doesn't stop employees now just to go and start deleting data when they think the company no longer needs it. They obviously need to speak to their MD and say, or their manager, and saying, we don't need this data anymore. Is it okay for me to destroy it? Those reams and reams of documents lying in the warehouse, or all those old records that we've interacted with people 10 years ago, that's no longer relevant. I don't need that information anymore. I need to destroy it. And how do I destroy it? Is it in a controlled manner? Is it via shredder? Is it permanently deleted on a system? Then once I've now have a purpose, further processing limitation, I cannot now just go and process that information at willy-nilly as much as I want to. And I need to get additional consent from the individual. If I've collected it for reason A and I want to use it for reason B, I need to get special information, approval from that individual or party, juristic person, that I will be using that information for alternative purposes. Number 5 relates to the information quality, because information quality impacts how we interact with people, and it could jeopardize them in a certain way. So what we've done is that we need to ensure that the information that we receive is correct and remains correct all the time, and there needs to be a formal process in place to ensure that that data gets updated all the time. What you would have noticed is many of the institutions, just when POPIA became enacted in July, many of the emails that people received in their personal capacity is that you had to provide them with your latest information. And that was the attempt to become legally compliant and ensure that the data stays relevant and accurate. We also need to be open. The data subject needs to be informed that we are collecting the data. That comes back to those cookie policies. And he also needs to know why I'm collecting the data. Number 7, we're going through this very quickly, but there's obviously a lot of detail behind this, but this gives a high-level overview of what needs to be done. We need to have the necessary security safeguards. So once we've collected the data, is it properly safeguarded? Hard copy documents, are they behind lock and key? Is there a policy that employees have now abided and have acknowledged, ensuring that they know what they should be doing? A clean desk policy, bring your own device policy. I bring my own device onto a company's network, I can copy the whole database from there. How do I know? Do I have a policy that enforces employees not taking my data and guiding them what is required and what's not? And then we need to have confidentiality agreements with all the various parties that work with the data. And that comes back to the security guard at the gate. He's a third party. I need to have a confidentiality agreement with him in place to protect me, because I'm ultimately liable for the data that he's collecting. And then also, there's a very important aspect here, is that there's a formal process in terms of if there's a data breach. As I've mentioned before, it's not a matter of when, it's a matter of if. It's not if, it's when the data is breached. We need to have a formal process in place where we actually inform all our data subjects in a timely manner. And the regulator will come down very hard on people who do not comply with this requirement. And then last but not least is that the data subject has the right to participate in his data accuracy. Can he ask me? He's got the right to ask me to ensure that I have his data, the correct data, and also if he has the right to be forgotten. That's that opt-out policy where I keep on sending you an email, you can say I no longer want to receive your spam. That's an opt-out requirement. I can no longer will receive that information based on my opt-out.
Sure. Albert, as you were going through these 8 points, one thing that I noticed is that almost on every bullet point there was a policy that needs to be created. And if you like me, you're still sweating about the things that were said before. Any resources, and maybe we'll share them later, or potentially share them post the webinar. Any resources that have been useful? I know you also said you had to teach yourself. Any resources that have been useful for you as you've been journeying to learn more about the subject of data and information compliance, that one could go and potentially see which policies you need to start to have, that you know?
There are a number of resources out there, and it can get quite confusing. Yep. What we as a company have done is there's a website, www.popia.co.za. That gives you the whole act. You can go and read any of the information that I've presented here in summary format. So that's a good resource. We've also used consultants in our business to help us with some templates, some policies, and policies, as you rightly said, are key here. Do we have the necessary governance in place? You cannot always, as a company, control all your employees on their daily activities, but you can govern them and tell them what is required. And I think that's where you really should start. Are they trained, and do we have a policy to cover many of those aspects?
Yeah, and I think another thing is certainly in our company that's we've tried very hard to do is around proving that you've done that.
Correct. Can you prove that you've demonstrated?
Can you prove that you've offered training and you've written those policies, sent them out, made sure that the employees have read them and they've understood them.
Got you.
Any ideas, and how have you done it? I know the answer. I'm just asking you for everyone else because I enjoyed what you did.
So what we've done is we've recorded a video in the cloud, and all our staff had to go and watch the video. That's online training when they had time, because we know we're all very busy. So on demand, they could quickly go and watch the video, and they had to complete an online attendance register, and that was a very quick win for our staff to get a high-level overview of what is required. Obviously, each employee is in his own right, needs to know what needs to be done in his department, and then you need to now go to the second layer. But what we're doing today and what we did initially in our business is to just have a high-level introduction to make aware on staff what the requirements are, and then the onus is on them then to go and find out more detail.
Cool.
Senzo, so you have highlighted that there's certain rights and obligations. Who's responsible for what, and what party needs to do
Yes.
what? I'm going to try and summarize the various obligations of the various people that are involved with this whole process. So first question we have to ask ourselves is, do we have personal information? And I think we all know that there is personal information per those blocks that I've showed you earlier. So we have a data subject. That's any person whose data it is. It could be a patient in a doctor's room. It could be an employee in your business. It could be a customer. So that's the data subject. A data subject now gives his data over to a data controller. That is a body corporate, the doctor's practice rooms, our company, our employees working for us. Our customers have entrusted us with their personal information. So we are then seen as the controller, and that could be an employer, and it could sometimes be outsourced as well. So we sometimes, like the security guard at the gate, he's an outsourced service provider. The onus is on us to ensure that that process of the information complies with the requirements, because we're ultimately liable. So the data subject has certain rights, the controller and the processor has certain obligations. Now let's have a look, high-level view of what those are. The data subject has the right to know what information there is. He's got the right to access that information, to fix and rectify, and also ask to be forgotten. And also, he can object to us collecting his information. I'm not going through all the detail that is open in the public domain to go and see what all the details are there. The controller determines why and how the data is going to be protected, processed, and he's ultimately liable and accountable. So, quick wins. Are there policies? Is there training? Are there security measures in place? What control have they over the processes of the information? Is there data privacy agreements that have been signed, confidentiality agreements with the processor of that information? And then we need to, as a company or as a controller, needs to ensure that there's compliance with the law, and the processor needs to ensure that there's compliance with the law as well, because they answer to the controller. They need to follow the instructions, and they also need to keep in line with what we have required from them or of them. So the principles are not very difficult. I'm going to high level summarize everything now in a nutshell as to what we've just said. We need to ensure that the information is lawful and fairly collected, and we are doing it in a transparent manner. Is it for a specific purpose? You can't just willy-nilly go and record some information. We only need to record information that is necessary, not for any other purpose. We need to ensure that it's accurate, and as long as if it's no longer required, we need to ensure that it's properly destroyed. And while we're owning that data, we need to ensure that it is safeguarded. And this slide here, in a nutshell, summarizes the whole act of what is required. Not a tick box, principle-based.
Cool. I think before we launch into the Q&A portion of this, because I've been hogging the microphone here, it's easy to see it when it's on a single slide, and you say, well, these are the 5 or 6 points that are important, or these are the 8 pillars of it. Realistically, how long, in your experience, and you might not know, but how long would implementing these various measures take if I'm starting today?
This is a very interesting question. How long is a piece of string? Because no company is the same.
Yeah.
No person is the same. But there's a few quick wins.
Yeah.
You can immediately do a few things that will ensure that you become compliant or on the roadmap to compliance. First of all, we need to understand the difference between POPIA, and I think we've covered that, and I think everybody listening in today would know the difference now, what that is. What's the difference between data privacy and POPIA? And we aim for data privacy compliance, all those principles that I've explained earlier, so we can tick that one. We need to focus on the governance. What do we need to do to govern people working for us and all the people processing information? The governance could be done through a data officer that's appointed. That's a quick process. You go onto the regulator's website and you can register your dedicated employee. On the website, it's a quick half an hour if the website is up and running. It works quite flawlessly. Then we need to establish those policies. and those procedures. And we've mentioned many of them today. Bring your own device, data security, data governance. Are you allowed to save data on your desktop because it's easy to steal information from somebody's desktop? Do you have various compliance obligations? We've gone into a lot of detail, and obviously we can expand and have a whole discussion around that. But for sake of time, we don't have enough time to discuss all those. Training and awareness, and that's what we're doing now. That's what we've done with our staff. You can have various levels of training, but obviously basic awareness is key. We need to map the data. So we need to know what data we have and then know what to do with it. I'm going to come back to this one because that's going to take more time. Then how do we protect the data, especially accounts? And then we need to ongoing monitor because business is not static. It changes all the time. We need to ensure that we stay abreast of what the changes are in the business and the new requirements. And as we become aware of new processes and changes in the business. And I think what's most important here is that we keep it practical. There's no tick box. Ensure that you treat the data in a respectful manner and keep everybody informed. I think that's the key. I just want to come back to number 7 quickly. You need to be able to demonstrate compliance. Nobody's going to hold you to violating the act if you've shown that you try to comply. And as I said, there's no tick box here, so they can't say you haven't ticked this box. Obviously, there are a few tick boxes, but have we tried to demonstrate compliance? So there's 1 to 10, but number 7 here is the most important. I need to know what data I have, where it's stored, and how are we protecting it, and how are we destroying it, and when. So what we've done is we've done a spreadsheet, and we've got each department to list all the data types that they had, and then they needed to list next to it where it's saved, how it's controlled, who's the data controller, and how it's destroyed. And it's very easy, but that takes typically a bit longer. Only once you've done that can we protect the data properly. But I think the other items are quick wins, and it will literally take you a couple of days, if maybe not even less, just to do those basic controls.
Sure. Albert, I feel like I've been on a roller coaster ride, and I'm just walking off now, and So thank you so much. Sorry?
I think it's normal.
Yeah.
It's a big learning curve for everybody, and it's not a straightforward tick box as I've mentioned before.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think one of the things I'm taking away is this whole concept of cradle to grave, that when it comes to data and information, individuals and companies need to be responsible from its inception, how it's collected, and then how it's used through its life, and the responsible termination of it.
I think that's important, Senzo, is that it's not just based on individual performance, it's a company obligation as well. So everybody needs to work together to make this work.
Yeah, no, 100%. Just going to go to some questions. I've got a question here that says, what about companies that use cameras as security to control certain access areas? Who controls that firstly? Is it the company, is it the security company? And how must that be handled? Now, when I read this question, there are 2 elements to it. It might not be 100% POPIA, but there's an element of the company who's going to record and hold the recordings. And then also for the person who's being recorded, what rights do they have?
This is my uninformed opinion. I'm not sure if this is personal data, because personal data relates to that one slide that we've showed with all the different categories of personal data that identifies people. But this is definitely a privacy issue. My opinion would be that you need to inform people that they are being recorded. So when you walk into a building, to notify them that they are either being video recorded or voice recorded as well. You can't just go and record people's voices and then use it later on without their consent. I think that's the key here. But similarly, companies can't just contract their obligations out to a security company. It's important that the company has an agreement with the security company on who owns the data and what they're allowed to do with it.
Yeah, no, that's very useful. I think we've come to the end of our chat. I don't want to keep you any longer than we have to. I am going to just ask you any closing thoughts on POPIA and data privacy that you might have as maybe advice as various people leave. I think we've got people online on the call who've got small companies, and we've got people who might have big companies. Earlier we spoke a bit about what the low-hanging fruit are, like the registrations and so on and so forth. So any parting shots on this animal, this beautiful cuddly animal papaya?
This is all new to everybody. We'll all learn as time goes on, and obviously there will be a few court cases as people get exposed. I think the most important is that you don't get caught with your pants down, so to speak. that you can show at least that you've tried to comply with the law.
Yeah.
And as I said, know what data you have, where it's saved. If you need the data, collect it, but just be a responsible person or a party, and then destroy the data or declassify it or depersonalize it after you've used it. And those principles that I've showed earlier, those 8 principles, that slide is quite an important one because it gives you a high-level overview of everything that needs to be done. We're all learning, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah, no, definitely. Albert, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think it's extremely generous of you to share, to come on a platform such as this and share your thoughts and your learnings that you've picked up over, I almost said over the years, but I'm going to say over the months, the last few weeks and the last few months. And so we are extremely grateful for your time and extremely grateful to your team as well. So please say thank you to your team, because I know you've worked with your team on this and continue to work with them. I think also, thank you also for coming on, not as an expert, but as a sojourner on this journey of POPIA and compliance. It is extremely important. I see that there are a few comments around asking whether this recording will be made available for download. It will be available. We will just be needing to edit it over the next couple of hours, and then we'll share it on the Tarsus Distribution YouTube channel. So you can head over there to get it. You will receive an email that's going to be a summary of what's gone on today. It will also give you details of where you can get the video and potentially other material that might have been mentioned during the course of today. So do look out for an email that will come either this afternoon or tomorrow to the email address that you used to register for today's session. So on that note, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you have a fantastic Wednesday. I was in KZN yesterday, it was pretty hot, and today I'm in Joburg and it's a bit cold. So if you're in Joburg, enjoy the 20 degrees. If you're in KZN, enjoy the heat. Cheers, have a good day.